It's rare that you get two historical events separated by nearly 13 centuries that seem to map onto each other almost perfectly.
And terrifyingly so. We're not talking about vague thematic similarities here. We're looking at a specific structural collapse. You look at the Islamic conquest of Spain in 711 AD, and then you jump forward to the Iranian Revolution in 1979. On the surface, those are different worlds, different technologies, different geopolitics, but the mechanism of how the society fell, it's identical.
The mechanism being internal division.
Internal division as the catalyst for total regime change. In both cases, you had a society that was already cracking apart from the inside. It wasn't just an overwhelming external force that smashed down the gates. The gates were practically unlatched by the people inside because they were too busy fighting each other to notice what was waiting on the horizon. And once that power vacuum opened up, the result was the swift, uncompromising imposition of Sharia law.
Which is the other parallel the text points out. The legal outcome was the same.
Exactly the same. Despite the 1,300-year gap, the playbook for governance didn't evolve or soften. You saw the immediate enforcement of dhimmi status for non-believers, the jizya tax, the hudud punishments. Whether it was medieval Cordoba or modern Tehran, the legal blueprint was static.
That's the part that feels unsettling. We like to think history moves in a line toward progress or liberalism, but this suggests that certain ideological systems are unchanging. They just wait for an opening.
They wait for the host to weaken. That's the core argument here. Visigothic Spain didn't fall because the Umayyad army was invincible. It fell because the Visigoths were tearing themselves apart with civil wars and rival factions. Iran didn't fall to the Ayatollahs because Khomeini had a massive army. It fell because the Shah's opposition, leftists, students, intellectuals, was so fractured and focused on toppling the current regime that they didn't realize they were paving the road for a theocracy. And the warning, the really sharp edge of this argument, is that we are watching the same movie play out in the West today.
Let's start with Spain, 711 AD, because the popular image is usually just invaders arrive, conquer, settle. But the reality was messier.
Much messier. The Visigothic kingdom wasn't this unified, happy monolith. It was a pressure cooker. You had constant succession crises, kings dying, nobles fighting over the crown. There was no stability. And crucially, there was deep religious and social friction. The Jewish population in Spain at the time was being severely persecuted by the Visigothic Christian rulers. So you had a significant portion of the population that had zero loyalty to the state.
They had no reason to defend the status quo.
None. In fact, many of them saw the invaders as preferable to the current management. And then you have the nobles. There are historical accounts suggesting that rival factions actually invited Muslim forces in as mercenaries or allies to help them win their own internal squabbles. They thought they could use this external force as a tool.
Which is the classic error. Thinking you can ride the tiger.
Right. We'll use these guys to beat my rival, then we'll send them home. But Tariq ibn Ziyad lands at Gibraltar, looks around, and sees a kingdom that is fundamentally broken. He realizes he doesn't need to be a mercenary, he can be a conqueror. The internal chaos turned what should have been a defensible nation into a house of cards. And once they took power, the switch was flipped instantly.
The imposition of Sharia.
Overnight. And this is where the continuity is striking. The system they implemented, the Maliki school of jurisprudence, wasn't a light version. It was comprehensive. Non-Muslims became dhimmis. Protected, yes, but subjugated. Second-class citizens.
Can we drill down on that? Because dhimmi is a word that gets thrown around, but the mechanics of it are specific.
It's a contract of submission. You acknowledge Islamic supremacy. You pay the jizya, the poll tax, and in exchange you are allowed to exist and practice your faith privately. But you cannot hold authority over a Muslim. You cannot evangelize. Your legal testimony is worth less. It is a system designed to constantly remind you of your inferior status. And in Spain, this wasn't a temporary war measure. It lasted centuries. 700 years of Al-Andalus.
So you have this model in the 8th century. Now, fast forward to 1979, Iran. The setting is totally different. You've got oil, Cold War politics, modernization, but the dynamic of the open door is the same.
It's the same fatal mistake. The Shah's regime was unpopular. Sure, there was corruption. There was the Savak secret police. People had legitimate grievances. But look at who was protesting. It wasn't just hardline Islamists. It was communists, socialists, liberal Democrats, students who wanted a Western-style democracy. They were all united by what they were against, the Shah. But they had no unity on what they were for.
They assumed that if they got rid of the dictator, things would naturally get better.
They assumed the vacuum would be filled by, well, them. The leftists thought, we're the ones with the organizational power, we'll run the show. The liberals thought, we'll write a constitution. And meanwhile, Khomeini is in Paris recording cassette tapes, sending them back to Iran, building a network that was far more disciplined and far more ruthless than any of the secular factions realized.
It's that arrogance of the secularists, isn't it? Thinking that religion is just a quaint cultural artifact, not a political machine.
It's a profound blindness. They didn't take the theology seriously. They thought Khomeini was just a figurehead, a spiritual grandpa who would bless the revolution and then go retire to a seminary in Qom. When he came back, the trap snapped shut. The liberals and leftists who helped overthrow the Shah, they were the first ones lined up against the wall. The internal division of the opposition allowed a highly organized, ideologically rigid minority to seize total control.
And the legal system that followed wasn't some modern hybrid. It was a callback.
It was a return to the source code. That's what is so jarring. You're in the late 20th century, and suddenly the legal framework is pulling directly from texts that haven't changed since the Middle Ages. The Jafri school of jurisprudence in Iran is different from the Maliki school in Spain, technically, but the outcomes? Identical.
Wait, I want to push on that. Identical feels like a strong word. Surely, a modern nation-state operating in the 1980s functions differently than a medieval caliphate.
Functionally, in terms of bureaucracy, sure, they have ministries and parliaments, but ethically, legally, the core axioms are identical. Look at the treatment of women. Look at the apostasy laws. In 711, if a Muslim converted to Christianity, it was death. In 1980s Iran, if a Muslim converted to Christianity, it was death. The penalty for blasphemy? Death. The status of religious minorities? Dhimmi in all but name. Barred from the presidency, barred from key military posts, legally discriminated against in inheritance and blood money laws. The structure of supremacy is preserved intact. Time didn't erode it.
So the technology changed. They have tanks instead of horses, but the operating system is the same.
The software is exactly the same, and that's the scary part about the comparison. We tend to think that culture evolves linearly. We think, oh, surely they wouldn't bring back public flogging in the 20th century. But they did. Because the legitimacy of the system doesn't come from progress. It comes from adherence to a divine text that is viewed as perfect and final. If the text says X, you do X. It doesn't matter if it's year 700 or year 2000.
This brings us to the warning for the present. The text draws a line from Spain to Iran to us, to America.
This is the pivot. The argument is that America is currently displaying the exact same symptoms of internal division that doomed Visigothic Spain and pre-revolutionary Iran. We are fractured. We have culture wars that are tearing the social fabric apart. We have political infighting where each side views the other as an existential threat, much like the Visigothic factions did.
And the argument is that this creates the opening.
Right. You don't need an invasion fleet landing in New York Harbor. You don't need a violent revolution in the streets, at least not initially. You just need a society that is so distracted by fighting itself that it loses the will or the ability to maintain its own boundaries. The text mentions gradual demographic and political infiltration. That's the modern equivalent of the Visigothic nobles inviting in mercenaries. You allow the conditions for a rival system to take root because you're too busy arguing about pronouns or tax rates to notice the foundational shift happening under your feet.
But isn't that alarmist? I mean, comparing the U.S. explicitly to a collapsing 8th century kingdom feels like a stretch. Our institutions are robust. We have a constitution. Spain was a feudal monarchy.
Are our institutions robust, or do they just look robust because they haven't been truly tested by a rival ideology yet? Look at the universities, look at the legal system. We see fragmentation everywhere. The argument here is not that the geography is the same, but that human nature is the same. A house divided against itself cannot stand. That's the biblical truth, right? If half the country believes the other half is evil, there is no unified defense against an external or internal threat that is actually unified. Islamism, as a political ideology, is unified. It knows what it wants. Does the West know what it wants anymore?
That's the asymmetry. One side has certainty, the other has doubt.
Precisely. In 1979, the Iranian leftists were full of doubt and theory and debate. Khomeini had certainty. In 7/11, the Visigoths were full of intrigue and betrayal. The Umayyads had mission. Certainty always beats doubt in a power struggle. And if we look at the West today, we are drowning in doubt. We doubt our history, we doubt our values, we doubt our borders. That is blood in the water.
So let's play this out. If the pattern holds, what does the American version of this look like? Not necessarily a revolution tomorrow, but the process.
It looks like parallel societies. It looks like the gradual normalization of Sharia concepts within the legal system, arbitration courts, finance laws. It looks like the silencing of criticism under the guise of tolerance, which is effectively a self-imposed dhimmi status. You stop criticizing the ideology because you're afraid of the backlash, just like a dhimmi would be afraid of offending their Muslim rulers. It's a mental conquest before it's a physical one.
And the demographic piece. The text mentions open borders.
That's the accelerator. If you have a population influx from cultures that do not share the host nation's values, and the host nation is too weak or divided to insist on assimilation, well, you're creating the Visigothic scenario. You're importing the very friction that will eventually spark the fire. In Spain, the Reconquista took 700 years to reverse that. 700 years. That's 30 generations of people living under a system that viewed them as inferior. The point is, once you lose it, you don't get it back easily. Iran is 50 years in, and there's no sign of the regime cracking yet.
That duration is haunting. 50 years in Iran, 700 in Spain. It really puts the urgency of our current political squabbles into perspective.
It makes them look petty and suicidal. We are arguing over deck chairs on the Titanic while an iceberg is staring us in the face. The lesson from history is that civilizations are fragile. They don't die of old age, they die of suicide. They kill themselves through division, and then something else, something stronger, simpler, and harsher, moves in to take the space.
So the takeaway isn't just watch out for Sharia. It's fix the house.
Fix the unity. If you don't have a cohesive culture, you don't have a defense. It's that simple. Visigothic Spain forgot who they were. Pre-revolution Iran forgot who they were. If America forgets who it is, if we lose that shared identity, then the door is already open. We're just waiting for someone to walk through it.